I'm Jeff Carter, president of Bethany Theological Seminary, and we are having conversations with the president. And today it is my absolute joy to talk to Dr. Tamisha Tyler. Hi, Tamisha.
Hello.
So these conversations, it's just kind of an informal way for folks to get to know you a little bit better as far in your work and passions for your scholarship. But as introduction, let me share a little bit about you for those listening in. So, Dr. Tamisha Tyler. Dr. Tamisha Tyler earned her PhD from Fuller Theological Seminary in California. Her scholarly and teaching interests include theopoetics methods, Afrofuturism, and the fiction of Octavia Butler. She has completed fellowships with the Cultura Institute and Sacred Rites. And she has worked with such arts organizations as Level Ground, the Grunwald Guild, and the New Story Festival. Her poems have been shared widely and published in Siva and Fuller magazines. She is co-editor of the Feminist Studies in Religion blog, and she was a postdoctoral fellow at Louisville Institute before joining the Bethany faculty full time. And so, Dr. Tyler, it is a joy to talk with you um, about your scholarship, your passion, and your teaching. So let's begin. As we think about your varied career, as we heard in the bio, inside and outside academia, what led you to pursue scholarship and teaching on the graduate level as aspects of your professional life?
That's a great question. I think I don't want to sound too minimalist, but I led me in the sense that I was looking to create the spaces I needed as a seminarian. As a person that was always curious and always had this desire to go to seminary and was, initially discouraged because of the church denominations that I was in because I was a woman. And coming back around to going into that journey, I wanted to create the kinds of spaces where no one felt discouraged in going after their passion. So that was I was creating spaces that I wanted to be in. That was the kind of nucleus of it all. Um, Also, just generally being a nerd, I love learning. And once I started to teach and TA, I realized that I learn often by doing and engaging and in many ways teaching. And so I found this aspect of oh, I get to learn in a community from other people as I'm teaching. And that kind of sealed the deal in me wanting to be an educator. And what was really interesting is that I am learning that I was an educator in all of the spaces that I was in, whether officially in academia and also outside. Um, I chose academia and graduate school and seminary specifically because I think that there is something really powerful for a person who is an adult that is coming to this point in seminary. Seminary is so unique in that it is not just a learning experience where you're learning nuts and bolts, you're doing that, but it is literally taking the core of who you are and what you believe about the world through a crucible. And it's just to be able to walk with people during that time feels like a unique experience that I wanted to participate in. And so I think that's why I really wanted to focus on graduate level and really focus on people going through this sacred journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I want to kind of expand on that a little bit because I
Yeah.
quote you. You often will say the smartest person in the room is the room, and
Yeah.
that idea of kind of collaborative, cooperative education. So when you talk about the classroom, you wanted to create a classroom where you were welcomed into the space, and it would be a place where you would want to learn. Give me a few of the kind of what does a space like that look like to you, and what are you creating?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the space looks like um, an affirming space. So the reason why I say the room is the smartest, and I tell my students, the one thing we're not going to do is forsake the brilliance in the room, is because it's a affirmation and a recognition of the experiences and the lessons that students already bring into the classroom, even if they're new to said topic, right? They're going to bring themselves anyway. You might as well affirm who they are and see what we get out of it. So I think a space where there is affirmation for the things that you have already learned, the knowledge you already carry as you're coming into this opportunity of new knowledge is the base. Um, Play is also really important. You can't learn without first being okay looking like an idiot. This is why it's hard for many people to, like, including myself, to learn languages, because you have to Trevor Noah has this bit where he talks about all the languages that he's learned, and he's like, you kind of have to be an idiot. You have to act like, not saying children are idiots, but you have to, like, act like a child. You have to be willing to be look foolish, right, as you're mimicking sound and, like, all of those different things. And so it's like, if I can get you to let your guard down enough to play, it almost opens up this sense of, like, I am willing to do things out of my comfort zone and step into a bit of my insecurities to get to the other side. And that's okay. It's okay for you to do that. I think too, questions are probably the most important thing that I use to dictate a person's intelligence. So I'm going to teach you to ask really good questions. There was one of the classes I taught. Um, I was covering for a theological intro to theological reflection, and I would often do these impromptu sessions with the class. And one of the sessions was we were talking through um, what is theology and all these different things. And I said, okay, we're going to do this exercise, and you have 30 minutes, and we're going to do theology, but you can only ask questions. And they submit a question every week with their reading. Like, this is a question I have in reading. I said, we're going to start with one of your own questions. So I read one of the questions, and then immediately one of the students says, I said, you can't, nope. It has to be a question. And everybody kind of sat there and they're like, well, if this part is true, then what does it mean for blank? And I was like, mm-hmm. And then silence. Then somebody else asked a question, and then somebody else asked a question. And then eventually everybody kind of got going because they're doing, and I was like, you're doing theology. Like, we don't know definitively, and that doesn't make or break us, but it's our questions that get us to the other side. And so there's this sense of element of, like, the wisdom in the room, right? Everybody's asking questions, the element of play, right? You gotta sometimes ask a question that's, like, you may not think is the smartest question, but it needs to be asked. And then there's this element of, like, thinking clearly about the thing that you're asking sets you in a place of receptivity where you're learning, as opposed to, I'm here trying to prove to you what I know. And so I think those are the elements: play, uh, questions, and respecting and affirming previous knowledge that kind of sets the classroom in a really good way.
A great space. So then who are some of the teachers and writers that have influenced you along the way? Because obviously we're all influenced, and the way you set up the learning environment has been influenced by others. And I know Octavia Butler's obviously a big
Yeah, I
name
was
for
like,
you, but like who are some of the teachers and writers that have influenced you along the way?
yeah. Um, Besides Octavia Butler, I will say, when I was in junior high school, I was in drama. It was my first time being in drama courses. And there were two teachers in my junior high school who were sisters in law. They're both married brothers, and they're both teachers. And they ran the drama program. They called it Blackbird. Was the last name Blackbird? Something like that. Blackbird and Blackbird Productions. And watching them get us to come alive about Shakespeare in junior high, or all of the things, was really great. But what I really loved was that they were doing it together. Like, they had formed this partnership in teaching that still resonates with me as an adult. And I don't even remember, obviously it's Miss Blackbird, so I don't actually know their first names, but, like, that sense of collaborative aspect of teaching and, like, inspiring young people to be, you know, excited about something was probably one of my first real nuggets. My first nugget, I would say, in terms of teaching, is my mom. I always say my mom is my first theologian. She taught me about spirituality. She taught me songs. She taught me how to pray. I just had a conversation with her actually yesterday when she was telling me bits about her life, and I got to record it. And just hearing how she was incorporating um, growing up in the South during the Voting Rights Act and the Integration Act and all of these things, and the way that they were incorporated into the community and the protesting, and how she incorporated into her spirituality and theology so fluently because it was her life, you know. She's still teaching me. I would say other writers. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, my really fancy spinnable bookshelf. I fell in love with Ruben Alves. He is probably one of the biggest people in like first generation theopoetics that I really resonated with. Not just because of what he was saying, but how he was saying it, the way he would take you through a story and an understanding of something. And you're like, wow, how did we end up here? That was like really beautiful. I didn't even realize you were making a point. So you dropped that bomb. And now I'm like, oh, I have to rethink my life. But it was so beautiful. Love that. Also really love the work of Katie Cannon, the and Emily Towns, and the ethical maps that they help us to navigate at the intersectionality within womanist theology has been fantastic. Um, and then just like other artists, I love as a singer India Arie and her ability to tell a story and also affirm the complexities of your life, right? Great singer songwriter. So I just get all of these different like inroads from like different places, and I try to pick it up wherever I can.
All right, you got to say something about Octavia Butler,
Oh
right? You
yeah,
just went through that long list, and you know that was your doctoral work. You got to say something about Octavia Butler. So why Octavia Butler?
Octavia Butler changed the way I thought about theology. Um, by affirming the way I suspected about theology. And part of it was because when I read Kindred years ago, loved it, was like, I'm going to read everything. And then, you know, life. When I read Parable of the Sower in 2017, I was needing to figure out what I was going to write for my dissertation. I had no idea. Um, my advisor at the time was like, you have all these pieces, but you need to like solidify them with like an artist or like a phenomena or something. You need a focal point. And when I read about a young Black girl in the midst of all of this upheaval, decide to reject her father's God and create a religion, I was like, first of all, what is happening in the story? And one, why did you write this? What was it about religion? And so I started reading more of her work and her interviews and thinking about how she says religion is a force that humankind has used throughout history to evoke change. She's like, I'm not going to say for good or bad, but religion has been the force. Religion has been the catalyst. And I was like, wow, it really solidified for me why the lens of religion was important, but also how the artist work and response in that thing was just as important. Because I feel like my central question for my career question, as I'm thinking about all of the things that are happening, are what are the artists doing? So, like economists will follow the money, I'm going to follow the artists and go, why are you doing that? And then also, what role does religion or spirituality play, if at all, in the why? And Butler became an exemplar in me seeking out that question. This was her response to attempt to save the world, to steer them in a different direction. And she didn't abandon religion and spirituality, she actually centered it. And I just found that to be um, really affirming and eye opening in the way that I always thought about religion and theology, but it never been affirmed so acutely in that way before reading her work.
So was that then the transition to theopoetics? Because, you know, you really focus on theopoetics and you've got then the art in there as well as the writing. Tell me a little bit about that journey into theopoetics and why it's so important.
Yeah, I funny story about that. I in my program at Fuller in theology and culture, which is broadly under like the umbrella of theology and the arts, I was the only Black woman in the program. And it was really isolating because I was trying to find other people and find support. And, you know, sometimes when you're in that school, you can be in a bubble. And I was really depressed. And I honestly was going to quit. I was going to be like, this isn't for me. I'm going to leave. And maybe getting a sense of my anxiety, but not knowing to what depth, sent me an application to the Forum for Theological Education, FTE. They had a doctoral cohort for doctoral students of color. And he goes, apply to this. Here's a recommendation. And I went there and met all of these other students and faculty of color and walked up to Patrick Reyes, who is really influential in theopoetics, and was like, I'm just looking for people in my field. He's like, well, what's your field? And I was like, theology and the arts. And he goes, that's my field. And I was like, they do exist. And we had a conversation later that fall. And he's like, tell me what you're thinking of. And I was like, and he was like, have you ever heard of theopoetics? Now, this is important. I go, no, what's that? And so he explains to me, and he explains to me about ARC and the whole thing. And I was like, I'm in. That sounds like me, which ironically is how a lot of people get into theopoetics. They hear the term, and they go, that sounds like me. That's me. What I did know is that next January, I went back to my essay that I had written the year before to apply to FTE grant to apply again. And when I was rereading my essay, in my essay I wrote, I think we need something different. I think we need something like a theopoetics. I wrote out the word theopoetics 9 months before I had that conversation with Patrick. And I didn't even know that that was already like in my framework and that it existed outside of me until I had that conversation. Um, from there, that's where I discovered not just the art community, but all of the writing, Stanley Happer and Amos Wilder and all these different people. And that kind of created the container for everything that I was doing. So while Butler was solidifying the artist space, theopoetics solidified the methodological container that I was trying to figure out. And it just clicked.
And it clearly clicked here at
Yeah.
Bethany. I mean, we have one of the only master's degrees in theopoetics and writing, and so in our relationship with Louisville, you were a Louisville scholar. You were able to come here to Bethany, and then continue on as a faculty member. You are leaving this summer, and so when you think about the new courses you developed, the students you have influenced, the colleagues with whom you've made an impact. What's something that, when you think of your time with Bethany, that you walk away feeling pretty good about? We could even say proud.
I will say, I will say the thing that I brag about on Bethany all the time. So my first semester at Bethany, my first semester and my first real gig after my dissertation, I am going to teach a program in Afrofuturism. We're teaching the Afrofuturist class in the spring. It's the fall. I'm teaching Butler, which terrified me to be teaching something so connected to my dissertation, but also was the best thing that ever needed. And a week after registration started, the Afrofuturism exhibit at the Smithsonian was announced. And I remember having this crazy idea of like, it would be cool to take students to the Smithsonian. And because the format for the class was one of our weekend intensives, so 3 weekends over the course of 3 months, and I was like, what if this is one of those weekends to go to the Smithsonian? This is obviously, you don't just walk into a dean's office at an institution. Let me say this for those who are listening here, like, you do not do this in your first semester. You've just getting to know me. It's not been a year yet. It's not been 6 months. And I'm walking into offices going, hey, can we do this really random thing in like less than a year? And so I walk into Steve's office and he's not there. And I walk into Pam's office, the dean's assistant, and I'm like, I got this crazy idea. And then you walk in actually, because you were just walking around. Sometimes when you're there, you'll like walk upstairs to like see who's around. And so you walk into us having a conversation and you go, oh, I used to pastor a church in Manassas. Maybe they can host you. I, I hope y'all hear how rare. I don't think this will ever happen again, which is why I always tell this story. And I was like, that'll be great. And then poor Steve comes in later and he's like coming into office. And I was like, hey. And by this time, he knew that whenever I said hey a certain way, I had some kind of crazy idea. And he's like, uh-huh. He always says that, uh-huh, because he knows something crazy is coming. I said, so what do you think if we took students to DC to see this exhibit? And he's like, huh. And I was like, I've already talked to, oh, like I had all of the evidence of like, I've already talked to all these people. And he was like, if you can get the students who have already registered to say yes, they can go, we will do it. And by the end of the day, it was within 4 hours of me asking, we had a yes from all the students. We had a place for all the students to stay for free. We had a place to host the classroom sessions for free. We had a dinner through the IA program because they were hosting a dinner with the alumni, free for the students, and the students got a travel stipend in 4 hours. That never happens. That never happens. And I feel like that program, as daunting as it was to have to teach for the first time, both in front of the president and the dean, I was like, oh, so what? It was great. But that is probably my most proudest moment. And it's not just because it was just me. It was because it was really a communal, everybody jumped in at the idea and did what they could within their spirit to make that happen for our students. And so that's
But it's
probably my best. Yeah,
yeah, but it started with your idea and you wanting to share an experience with your students. So,
absolutely.
Tamisha, when I think about being a learning community and our commitment to students and being student centered, perfect example. And so
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of us, it's just making it happen, which is the easy piece.
Yeah.
It's the relationship with students and you coming up with that idea. So we're gonna talk in a minute about where you're moving to now. But what is something that you're going to take from your Bethany experience into your future endeavors?
So we also talked about this. So obviously, I talk about a lot of what I do in my other spaces, and one of the things that even people at my current employment was like, "Wow, that's really awesome. We need to think about how to incorporate that." Is our student update meetings. So faculty, was it once a semester, twice a semester? Once a semester, multiple times in the semester, will sit in a meeting and talk about every single student, every student. And the reason that that works so well is because institutions will naturally have silos where students can fall through the cracks. But if you have all of the faculty, they're also the advisors and all of the student services, and everybody's in a room and they go, how is this student doing? And one person is like, I haven't heard from them, but the other person can go, they're in my class, they're doing great. No student falls through the cracks because they're talked about multiple times a semester. And I always thought that that was great because having worked in other advising spaces and other things, students fall through the cracks all the time. And I was just explaining this to my co-director, and they were like, "Wow, that's really awesome!" Like, I feel like we should incorporate because we're building out our collective. I was like, we want something like that to be at the core of our collective work because we also don't want people to fall through the cracks. And this model is great. So just like I think that is the most tangible thing that is a direct correlation in like how do you make sure to care for people so they don't fall through the cracks? It's great.
Yep.
So we're going to
And
do that.
because of professors like you, those meetings have gotten longer because we have more students. I mean, that's the great
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we've doubled in size in the last bunch of years. And so I think that attention goes a long way. All right, so let's make the transition.
Yeah.
Talk for a moment about your new role in the organization with whom you're working.
Yeah. So I am currently the co-director of an arts organization called Level Ground. And we are a project incubator, artist collective, and documentary film company. We have been, oh, oh, the years are
Located in Los Angeles.
located in Los Angeles. Our artist collective are about 25 artists that span around the greater Los Angeles area. But our spaces are located in Los Angeles. We have been around for the past 13 to 14 years. It's always different for me because the idea of this nonprofit was originally birthed out of a student group during my time in seminary. And so I've been a part of this organization since I saw it birthed into the world. And so I'm always like, what year is this? Because I'm thinking of the pre year before the year. I started out as just a member of the artist community. Being an artist, it was my artist home for the last few years, and I had no anticipation that this would happen. This was totally out of the blue. But we had a transition, a necessary transition for that person to go into something that they really wanted to do. And that prompted a transition and an opportunity to apply to be a co-director. And it's been a really amazing, affirmative kind of transition. It allowed me to work directly with artists in supporting them, and also as an artist create arts together. But it doesn't forsake the other work that I do. So I'll still be able to adjunct, teach, um, incorporate those elements, as I said before, into the work. Um, we have some incredible artists. We also have an incredible production company. I do want to shout out our production team. Our latest documentary, Union, was just nominated for a news and documentary. What is it? News and something something Emmy through PBS. So we're hoping that we will be an Emmy awarded documentary film company soon, and not just the Emmy nominated documentary film company. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey seeing this organization evolve and now being able to participate in this new way.
And it takes so many of your loves and putting them together,
Mhm.
so as you can kind of carry out your own passion. Now, you did mention that you will continue to teach for Bethany
Yep.
as an adjunct professor, which is fantastic, and you will continue to do reading and writing. So tell me, what are you doing right now as far as
Oh,
who are you reading? What are you writing? Where's kind of all that energy going?
so many things. We have a Substack. Our organization, Level Ground, has a Substack where I get a chance to like write about crazy things once a month. It's great. I currently am starting a series of a theory that I've been thinking through for the last 2 years, called aesthetic gentrification, which takes models of gentrification and applies them to some of the appropriation of value and shifts that are happening within aesthetic things like music and food and all of those things. I am currently taking the dissertation and splitting it into two projects. So one will be a book on methodologies in theopoetics. Think of it kind of like a new primer. So it'll have um, the method that I teach my students and also the methodologies. So that way people kind of have a grounding wrestling text for theopoetics. And then the other book that I'm currently researching is looking at the work and life of Octavia Butler through the lens of religion. That's taking a little longer because the archives are massive, massive works. What else am I doing? I got a couple of reviews that are going to be coming up this year, and then also um, we're hopefully I can get it in the next couple of weeks. But there's uh, edited volume on theological anthropology that I get to write a interactive narrative game for. So think choose your own adventure, give yourself goosebumps kind of work that situates theopoetic anthropology. Well, yeah, maybe theopoetic anthropology in a way that can be interactive for future classrooms or people to engage. So those are just some of the projects that I'm doing right now. I'm very excited.
Just a few projects. So let me just say in conclusion, I mean, Dr. Tyler, it has been an absolute privilege to serve with you at Bethany and to have you on our full-time faculty. Tamisha, it has just been a joy, whether you bringing your freshly baked bread into the seminary when you're here, or just walking with you through the Smithsonian and the Afrofuturism exhibit. That was an absolute gift. It is clear that you have a deep and abiding faith that is expressed most clearly in the arts in the most creative way. As you described, the classroom, a place that clearly is collaborative and respects the gifts each individual brings, is serious in scholarship but playful in the way we interact. The variety of gifts that you have, not only for teaching but in ministry and the arts, are clearly evident. And so, as we end this conversation, glad to know that we continue to be in relationship moving into the future, and that you will always be part of the Bethany family. So thank you so much for this time. And we just wish you all the best as you continue in your ministry, particularly there in Los Angeles.
Thank you so much. And you guys are not getting rid of me. So, yeah. Settle in, everyone. We're in for the long haul. This is going to be so great. Thank you for um, being such a great example of what kinds of innovation and spaces to like move in ways that are unique. I don't know that I could have done these things at many institutions, maybe any other institution. So I'm really grateful that this has been the foundation of my teaching career. And I think that it has helped me solidify a style and has given me permission to teach in a way that is true to who I am and how I want to connect with my students. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thanks. Thanks for this conversation.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.